So good morning students. My name is Nikita and I am here to take your science classes. So basically I'll be covering your NCERT, and if you would like to study something which is not covered in your NCERT and out of your syllabus, then you can let me know and you can mention it in the comment section. Alright, so let us start with the first chapter, that is life processes, and this is chapter 5 of your NCERT. Alright, so what do you mean by life processes? So if we break this term life and processes, that means the processes which are involved in our lives, right? So the processes which are involved in keeping us alive. How can we differentiate between a living and a non-living organism? A living organism can move, it can eat, it can talk, it can sleep, but can a non-living thing can do all this? Can your chair or an almirah or the fan or the light, can they move? No. Can they eat? No. Can they sleep? Absolutely not. Then what does it differentiate? How do we differentiate between us and the non-living things? Very simple. It is all because of the movement that I have told you. We can eat, we can sleep, we can talk, we can move. So all these processes which makes us different from the non-living organisms are known as life processes. So these processes are basically involved in keeping us alive. We can move, we can eat, all because of these processes. Alright, so now if I talk about us, the humans, we can travel from one place to another using our legs. So that involves movement, and movement is carried out by our muscle cells, right? The blood is being transported from the heart to the different parts of the organs. It carries the deoxygenated blood back to the lungs, and where the oxygen is added to the blood, gets oxygenated, and then again this blood carries this oxygenated blood to the different parts of the organs, right? So the blood is a connective tissue which is involved in the circulatory system, right? So this is how the different supporters or the carriers help in carrying on different life processes. Without pumping of heart, we cannot stay alive. Without eating or generating energy, our organ system cannot do any work. So these all involves what we call as life processes. So the processes involved in the maintenance job of a living system are known as life processes. For example, movement is coordinated by muscles. Circulation of oxygen, carbon dioxide, nutrients, they all are coordinated by blood and lymph, which are called as connective tissue. So I'll be carrying forward and explaining you different types of life processes. So let us start with nutrition. So what do you mean by nutrition? Nutrition is a process nutrition is a process by which we get nutrients, and nutrients are useful to obtain energy. We move from one place to another, we require energy. The muscle cells require energy. Alright, once we eat a food, the food can be eaten both in organic ways or inorganic compounds. Then these are being broken down into simpler compounds with the release of energy. Okay. Now we understand that we humans are both vegetarian and non-vegetarian. There is an intake of different molecules of energy when we take veg food, and different molecule of energy when we take non-veg food, right? So it depends on one's choice, but ultimately the food is to be broken down into simpler compounds which are then consumed by different organs, and the energy is released, which is then utilized to perform different life processes. Okay, here we are good, right? So moving forward, nutrition can be of two different types. We have autotrophic and heterotrophic. We definitely know it. We have learned in our primary classes what are autotrophs and what are heterotrophs. Autotrophs are the organisms that can synthesize their own foods, but heterotrophs are the organisms that depends on autotrophs for their nutrients and food. So autotrophs, the very common and very simple example is plants. Also, we have another example of autotrophs as blue-green algae. So these organisms, they do not depend on anything else or any living organism for their nutrition, but they can synthesize their own food. Right? So we also know that a very simple process in plants which is utilized or which is useful in production of their own food as well as with release of oxygen is called as photosynthesis. So photosynthesis, it involves the usage of this green pigment called as chlorophyll in the presence of sunlight. Chlorophyll, with the use of sunlight, it breaks down carbon dioxide and water molecules to carbohydrates due to the release of oxygen and extra water molecules. So this carbohydrate is in the form of starch, glucose, and whatever the requirement of the organism is. For example, if I talk about plants, so in plants, this carbohydrate is in the form of glucose. So the glucose is stored as a reserve in the vacuoles of the plants, and they are not used immediately but can be stored as a reserve, and whenever plant requires some energy to carry out some process, and that particular reserve is being utilized by the plants. Alright, so autotrophic nutrition is where a simple food material obtained from inorganic sources in the form of carbon dioxide and water. As I mentioned the process, so 6 molecules of carbon dioxide when combined with 12 molecules of water in the presence of chlorophyll, which is the green pigment, and sunlight, it produces 1 molecule of glucose, which is C6H12O6, with the release of 6 molecules of oxygen and 6 molecules of water. So this is the equation of photosynthesis. Now, as I mentioned, what is a chlorophyll? Chlorophyll is a green colored pigment which is present in the leaves. This is what we know in our common language. But if we go in more technical language, so chlorophyll is a green colored pigment which is present in the plastids of the plants. Plastids are present on the leaves surface of the plants. So the type of plastid which carries or which contains this green colored pigment are called as chloroplast. So depending upon the coloration of the leaves, we can have chromoplast, which results in the orange or yellow color pigmentation of the leaves. We have leucoplast, which is colorless in nature. So depending upon the type of pigment present in these plastids, we have different types of plastids present in the plants. So the common one which we will be discussing about is chloroplast containing chlorophyll. So chlorophyll is a green colored pigment which is present in the plastids of the plants. Now, we'll now be discussing step by step how this chlorophyll is involved in conversion of carbon dioxide and water molecules to carbohydrates with the release of oxygen and water. Let's start. So what does chlorophyll do? Chlorophyll first absorbs the light energy from sunlight. Now this light energy is get converted into chemical energy because ATP is to be released, and ATP is a kind of a chemical molecule. So the light energy is converted into chemical energy. Chlorophyll also is involved in 2 main steps. First of all, it splits 12 molecules of water into 6 molecules of oxygen and 6 molecules of extra water from the plants. Secondly, it produces carbon dioxide to any form of carbohydrates, be it glucose or starch. Then this goes and gets stored as a reserve in the vacuoles of the plants. Now, next we will be discussing about stomata. Just like chlorophyll, there is another important part which is involved in photosynthesis is stomata. We know stomata are the small pores which are present on the surface of the leaf, and this is involved in the process of photosynthesis. How does stomata is involved in process of photosynthesis? Very simple. Stomata are very small pores which are present on the surface of the leaves. Alright. This is the structure of stomata. So first let me explain you the structure of stomata. So stomata has guard cells which are kidney shaped cells. What is guard cells function is? It provides the turgidity to the stomata. Now these you can see, these all are chloroplast. These green color dots are chloroplasts. So a leaf surface has multiple chloroplasts, and these chloroplasts contains chlorophyll. So large amount of chlorophyll is required during the process of photosynthesis. Now this space between the two card cells is called a stomatal pore. Alright. Now this is the open stomatal pore structure and this is a closed stomatal pore structure. We'll be explaining the difference between the two. Now you can see, since it is swollen, that means some water inflow has taken place. So the water from outside has entered the leaf, which has resulted in the opening of stomata, and thus the swelling of the guard cells has taken place. If stomata is closed, what will happen? If stomata is closed, so definitely no photosynthesis is going to take place, because stomata is the site where exchange of gases is taking place, oxygen is released and carbon dioxide is taking place. Secondly, stomata is a place where transpiration also happens. What is transpiration? Where the loss of extra water takes place from the surface of the leaf. So if stomata is closed, that means photosynthesis is not taking place. So about transpiration we'll be talking about in detail in our coming lectures, but for just an understanding, transpiration is the process where the extra water gets lost from the surface of the leaf through stomata. Alright, so also what is the main function of guard cells? As I mentioned, guard cells helps in maintaining the shape of stomata. Right? If we don't have any guard cells, then excess of water may result in bursting of stomata, or very deficiency of water may even result in very lot of shrinkage of the stomatal cells, which should not be the case. And therefore, guard cells involved in maintaining the shape of stomata. So what do you think? A plant keeps on performing this process of photosynthesis all day and night? No, absolutely not. Plant doesn't carries out photosynthesis every time, and one main reason being plant requires light. In absence of light, photosynthesis cannot take place. So mostly during the daytime, plants carry out process of photosynthesis, and during the daytime the photosynthesis does not take place. So the one question that arises is, if during the night no photosynthesis is taking place, then stomata is open or closed? Stomata is closed. Why? Due to transpiration, there is a loss of water that takes place from the surface of leaf, and this loss of water takes place through this stomata. So if during the night as well, when no photosynthesis is carrying out, if these stomata stays open, then the water keeps on getting removed out of the body of the plant, which ultimately results in death of the plant. Therefore, to prevent excess loss of water or transpiration, the stomata closes during the night time, and this closing and opening of stomata is coordinated or regulated by guard cells. These are kidney shaped guard cells. Alright, so as we have discussed about photosynthesis in detail, we know that for photosynthesis a plant requires this pigment called chlorophyll, it requires sunlight, it requires carbon dioxide as well as water. But this is not sufficient. Plant also requires some other components in addition to these. What are these? It requires nitrogen, it requires phosphorus, it requires iron and magnesium to carry out this process of photosynthesis. Nitrogen is abundantly present in the environment, but plant doesn't take the gaseous nitrogen just like it takes carbon dioxide. So in what forms plant takes nitrogen? It takes nitrogen in the form of nitrates and nitrites, which are involved in synthesis of protein and other compounds. So tell me what is required for photosynthesis. We have carbon dioxide, we have water, we have sunlight, we have green colored pigment called chlorophyll. Then we require nitrogen in form of nitrates and nitrites, we require magnesium, we require iron, and we require phosphorus. So there are 8 components which are majorly required by the plants to carry out photosynthesis. And these compounds, nitrates and nitrites, they are being utilized or absorbed by the roots and stems of the plant directly from the soil. In the soil, the organisms are being broken down into simpler compounds, releasing nitrates and nitrites by microorganisms. And those nitrates and nitrites are then absorbed by the plants to carry out the process of photosynthesis. So, today we have discussed about autotrophic nutrition and about photosynthesis in detail. In our next lecture, we will be discussing about heterotrophic nutrition. Thank you.